Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Behind the Scenes of Jrock's Pop Culture Revolution. Now, as you guys know, we do one of these episodes every Wednesday. I film it about this time. It's about 9:15 at night, um, in beautiful Long Beach, California. Well, as you know, Thursday morning at 8 a.m. exactly. Every week we roll out a brand new episode of our big show, J Rock's Pop Culture Revolution. That's of course our pop culture show. So anybody that's a fan of pop culture, you're going to want to tune into our show. And boy, do we have a real special episode we're going to ready to roll out tomorrow. And sometimes you know. The episodes turn into something else than what I originally had planned, and that was such the case with episode number 34, um, which is going to roll out tomorrow at 8 a.m. as I said. Now, before we do the big reveal on what our show topic was for this week, let me tell you. Initially, I was reading some stuff on the internet, and I thought this would be a great show topic. I mean, and we're going to get into why I picked this for a topic. But before the big reveal, like I said, I got to tell you, what started out as originally going to be a one-part episode turned into a two-part episode. And as you know, anytime we've done that in the past, it's always turned into a pretty special episode. So, okay, first of all, we're going to start off with the big reveal. Pinocchio. Now, you may be asking, why do an episode on Pinocchio? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the title of the new episode. Okay, so um, come to find out, that the film was originally released, I believe it was October 7th, 1940. Now that's going back quite a bit. So we decided to call this because it's very aptly titled is celebrating 86 years of Pinocchio, and that's because specifically the Walt Disney film Pinocchio. Now, obviously, like a lot of movies, Pinocchio is based on a somebody else's story. Wasn't originally a Walt Disney story at all. In fact, the Walt Disney movie, of course, is based on a novel. Well, actually, like a short a series of short stories called The Adventures of Pinocchio that date back to the late 1800s, if you can believe that. And again, the Walt Disney version of the movie doesn't come out until 1940, and so we should note the fact that it's based on um, like a journal of short stories that dated back to the late 1800s. By the time Walt Disney got a hold of Pinocchio and turned it into the Disney classic that we all know and love it to be today, um, the guy that wrote and created the original Pinocchio story was long dead. By the time the movie comes out. So just kind of think about that next time you watch Walt Disney's version of Pinocchio. Um, well, like I said, so initially I go in because I was reading stuff on the internet about the fact that Pinocchio was celebrating its 86th anniversary this year. That's quite when you stop and think about. I mean, how many of us have seen the classic Walt Disney animated movie Pinocchio? I bet every kid out there's seen it at least once or twice. Okay, I've seen it a handful of times in my lifetime. And as I pointed out at the beginning of tonight's episode, I've got this, and this is more than just the movie on DVD. This was released years ago, and again, as I said, we're celebrating 86 years this movie this year. But when I got this, actually, to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the film, then this was released years ago. It's called let's see what it yeah 70th anniversary edition of Pinocchio. So again, people have been celebrating Pinocchio for a number of years now, and it's worth celebrating. When you stop and realize that the original Pinocchio story that it's based on is was quite dark. It was not the sweet, cute, lovable Pinocchio that we all know and love from the Walt Disney version of the film. The original story was much darker. Pinocchio was much ruder and cruder. In fact, Walt Disney got to a point after Pinocchio had been in production, he halted production on the movie, and he wanted them to. He said, "No, this got to be this is Disney. The way Pinocchio is. I realize you guys are staying true to the original story, but no, we can't do that. This is the Disney company. We're family friendly. We want people to fall in love with Pinocchio. You guys got to make him much more cuter, friendlier, more lovable." And so that's why the Walt Disney version of Pinocchio is very different from um, the original version of Pinocchio, the original story. So there's that. But I really want to focus on tonight is you're going to tune into the episode tomorrow thinking you're going to be talking all about Pinocchio. We kind of what ended up happening, come to find out, is because Pinocchio was originally released in 1940 during a World War II era. Not just Disney films, but many films did not make it over um, to be played in the European war-torn countries, and there were a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, the war is going on. There were many theaters that had been destroyed because of the war. There were many of the U.S. films were not being sent over to the Europe and other war-torn countries during the war. So many of the European countries wouldn't see Pinocchio or Bambi or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, until after World War II had ended, and then they would re-release the films and they would send them over to Europe. And so people in those war-torn countries were seeing Pinocchio on that for the very first time. Many of the theaters were destroyed, as I said. Some the projectors in that had been destroyed or damaged, and so after World War II, many of these theaters had to be rebuilt. That was just kind of one small fraction of what happened, because what I discovered in my research for this episode number 34 to be exact, part one really heavily discusses kind of what was going on, and how World War II affected not just Pinocchio and Disney, but other major blockbuster films at the time. And so, the war going on was just kind of one fraction. Then you got, because war was going on, people were struggling financially. People were going off to war. Some people were, never, they went off to war, never came back. And then the fact that, World War II was going on at the time, again, people were struggling financially. So when you have a choice to make between, do I spend my little bit of money I got to go to movies and have a good time, or do I go and buy food for the family? When you're put in a situation like that, maybe you don't get a chance to go to the movies, and so people were going through experiences like this. Also, I was reading in many of the World War II war-torn countries, transportation became an issue. I mean, again, that's something we take for granted. That, like, I went to see a movie just last weekend, and it was pretty good movie. But I want to go to the movie. I just hop in my car. I drove myself to the movie theater. I was there within minutes. But now again, back during World War II era, not everybody had a vehicle. Again, transportation. I mean, it was just a major thing for some people that didn't have a vehicle. Maybe a date at the movies was more than just putting gas in the car. Maybe it was for many people that didn't have a car, or depended on public transportation. That became an issue as far as well, can't go to movies because I don't. Not only do I have very little money, but I don't have money to pay for the bus fare or anything like that. And so this became a major thing during the 1940s, World War II era. And so while the war was going on, like I said, many people were struggling financially, and so a lot of people stopped going to the movies. And what I was reading is it took a lot it took a lot longer after the end of World War II for a lot of war-torn countries in Europe to rebuild, and it wasn't really until 1945 in Europe when people really started going back to the movies. But here in the U.S., of course, the United States wasn't as much what you'd call war torn, So the U.S. recovered, from what was going on during World War II a lot quicker than some of those European countries. So once World War II ended, a lot more people started going to the movies again. From what I was reading, um, the people kind of really rebounded and wanted to go out and have a good time, and people started going to the movies again, really kind of almost right away. Um, and so when you tomorrow, when you watch part one of our episode celebrating 86 years of Pinocchio, I want you to understand a good chunk, a majority of the episode is spent kind of talking about what was going on during World War II and the stuff that I just kind of summarized for you. And as the episode ends tomorrow, we really start kind of talking about um, Pinocchio and how, like I said, Walt Disney halted production of Pinocchio when he realized that he wanted Walt Disney's version Pinocchio to be much more family friendly because he felt the way that they were staying too true to the original Pinocchio story, and he thought we can't have this is Disney. We can't have people come to a movie. People come to be entertained when they come see a Disney movie, and they want it to be family friendly. They don't want a puppet that's rude and crude and really dark and evil. That's not going to work for Disney. So again, it's interesting because I never really realized that all my years of being alive until I did the research for this episode. I never realized that originally Pinocchio was quite a dark character, and Disney got a hold of the Pinocchio character and story, and they really made it their own. And Walt Disney was heavily involved in that, and he had to approve everything, of course, being the head of Disney, the CEO and everything, and the founder. But it's really, if you do the research yourself, I'm going to see if I can find some of these pictures of the original kind of what the original dark kind of Pinocchio looked like compared to the sweet puppet we see here on the cover. So just as our episode ends tomorrow, as part one is coming to an end, I kind of tell you about the fact that how Walt Disney, Disneyed up Pinocchio, if you will, and really drastically altered what the character originally was. And it's interesting sometimes, to learn this stuff, and you find out, that's why I think I dare say, of course, the story of Pinocchio, like I said, dates back to the late 1800s, and by the time it's Walt Disney gets hold of it and turns it into animated classic that it is 86 years later. By the time the movie's made and it comes out in 1940, the original creator Pinocchio has since passed on, and so he never got to see his story become the huge classic that it is 86 years later. I wonder what he would have thought of the Walt Disney version of Pinocchio. We'll of course never know, but it's interesting. And so even though Pinocchio is based on, and I'm not going to reveal who was the creator of the original Pinocchio, because we discussed that in the episode. So I want to save a little something for you guys to watch the episode. But again, keep in mind when you watch part one tomorrow that we talk a lot about World War II and what was going on with the movie going experience and that because of the war and what was happening. I mean, again, initially what I found out was when Walt Disney released their version of Pinocchio, it was not an immediate box office success because what Disney found out early on, like when Pinocchio came out, was that a lot of the success at the box office depended on many things, such as how it did, in foreign markets and that. And so, since several foreign markets weren't able to see the film during World War II, it'd be like I said, it wouldn't be until 1945 until Disney would re-release things like Pinocchio, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Bambi, and then people in these war-torn countries throughout Europe are seeing these films for the first time, and all of a sudden, the money they had been making during World War II, money started rolling in all of a sudden for Disney and these other classic films of the time, and so all of a sudden Disney was making the money that they weren't making during World War II, and so I just kind of thought we needed to really touch upon that and kind of tell that story, and so maybe tomorrow when as part one of episode 34 is wrapping up, you're like, okay, they just barely touched the surface, and they haven't told the complete story of Pinocchio, and that is exactly why, my friends, that I said, okay, we have to make this a two-part episode. That was an original plan, but you find things out along the way, and you're like, okay, we want to not only tell the complete story, but we want to tell this part of a story that I don't think anybody really ever knew about. But I've seen documentaries and things on Pinocchio and stuff, but nothing really ever touched upon this. I thought, wow, this is something we got to really tell this story as well, because it is part of the Pinocchio story. And so, part two, though, I can tell you, folks, part one is kind of introduction, if you will, the opening ceremonies. Part two is going to be, we're going to tell you, we're going to get into the details, if you will. We're going to talk about all the characters and the storyline and why 86 years later we're still talking about Pinocchio. People still love this. I mean, wow. I just can't believe what Walt Disney did. He took a very dark, rude and crude character and turned it into this, man. So even though Pinocchio started out as something else, a lot more darker, Walt Disney got a hold of it and did his magic. And there's going to be a certain group of people out there that may have a problem with that. They say, oh well, they Disneyed it up, and they took something that was dark, and they kind of just Disney did what they did. They did their magic, and they totally changed what it originally was. But I got to give it to Disney, because I think Walt Disney was right as far as if they'd stay really 100% true to the original Pinocchio story. I mean, I don't know that too many people would want to see that. I mean, I don't think too many. I don't think too many mothers and fathers would want to take their little kids to see, an evil, rude, mean, and nasty puppet. But they would. I mean, who's going to have a problem with this? And then you got not just Pinocchio, but you got Jiminy Cricket. I mean, who is not just kind of a narrator, but the voice, the conscious of Pinocchio throughout the entire movie. And I remember Jiminy Cricket from the first time I ever seen this film. Jiminy Cricket is one of my all-time favorite characters. In fact, to end tonight's episode, I'm going to tell you guys a real fun story. Kind of take a page out of my own personal life. Years and years ago, when I went to Disneyland to apply for a job, they have these offices when you go to apply for a job, and I think it's called the casting office or something like that. And I went, and I was trying to get a job, working in the park. Wasn't sure what they were hiring for, but they had all kinds of positions they were hiring for. And so I remember didn't end up getting the job, so I'll preface the story with that. But I went down there, and I was kind of thinking along the way. And when I got in there, one of the first things the interviewer asked me was, okay, out of all the Disney characters, which one would you say you're the most alike? And so I was trying to think of something. I thought I was real clever. Okay, maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But again, I didn't end up getting the job, so who knows? But I will say this. So what I said when the lady asked me, of all the Disney characters, who do you think you're the most like? I said, well, maybe Jiminy Cricket, because I always let my conscience be my guide. Well, folks, we try to entertain, we try to make you laugh, and sometimes we do it by just taking a page out of our life here. Um, I hope you guys have enjoyed the latest episode. This has been episode number 14 of Behind the Scenes of Jrock's Pop Culture Revolution. And every Wednesday night, we pump out one of these episodes to kind of give you a little preview of what's coming tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, 8 a.m. On Fire Rock TV. I'd like to thank my good friend Tom Collier over there for putting our show over, because a lot more people have been seeing this show and telling us how much they really enjoy it. So tune in tomorrow at 8 a.m. You're going to see part one of our episode number 34, 86 years of celebrating Pinocchio. And then, but if you like what you've seen, and then again, you're really going to want to tune in after you watch tomorrow's episode, because 1 week exactly from tomorrow, we're going to roll out part two, where we really get into tell the complete story of Pinocchio. You're not going to want to miss that, folks, because it's quite a story. I can't wait to tell it to you. I am Jason J. Rock Houston. I have been your host tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you again real soon. Bye for now.